Hey, we're just gonna go in today. I was sitting here thinking about what I wanted to talk about and what topic, especially now that I'm going to be talking more about business. But lately, I feel like I've even been putting myself in a box because I was only talking about business and I was like, oh, this feels wrong because there's so many other important pieces of me that I want to share. And when I boxed myself into that, it felt wrong. It wasn't aligned. I want to talk about business, but I'm not this hyper masculine person that only talks about business. And I'm disciplined and I'm focused, but I also have a softness. And I think working on ourselves is just as important as working on the business. And so I wasn't thrilled when I was sitting here thinking about pure business topics because that's not what matters. And there's a boatload of helpful business videos out there from other gurus that you can go watch. But I think that the reason that so many people aren't successful is because their current business is the byproduct of their patterns and random tactics. Like, I could talk about marketing and sales and the next thing. And I do love that. I nerd out on it, but that's not what I want to talk about. And yes, you need strategies in all of those areas, and it is important to hone in on those skill sets. But I think what you need right now might be more about the psychology of it. If you've ever been emotionally tapped out or burned out or having a hard time dealing with what business is a lot of the time, which is an X-rated personal development roller coaster that you can't get off and it goes whether you're ready or not, it's psychology. I want to talk about psychology and about positive versus negative reinforcement because our psychology is the very things, the way that our brain is wired, the way that we make decisions, how we think about ourselves, how we think about our clients, how we think about strategy, the way that we lead our team, the way that we show up, the way that we are on sales calls, whether we close or not, what happens in the way that we respond when we've gotten a lot of no's, because the job is no, and you're going to hear a lot of no's, but what happens to you when you hear 10 no's in a row? Are you still empowered? Or do you start doubting yourself? What's wrong with me? And with positive and negative reinforcement, in essence, we have positive things that we perceive as rewards will reinforce behaviors. We know that. Negative things or punishments will reduce how often we do behaviors because we don't want to be punished, right? And so we take actions based on fear and pattern because if I'm afraid of something or I don't want something to happen, I'm going to behave in a manner that manipulates the situation to ensure that that bad thing doesn't happen. And so those actions that we take based on fear or patterns that we have, those are the loops that get reinforced the more that we do them. Because we infer positive reinforcement every time the bad thing that was in our mind, whether it was real or not, doesn't happen. So we take ABC action. The negative thing that we were afraid of doesn't happen. We now associate X action or coping strategy with this kept me out of pain. I'm going to keep doing that. And this all happens subconsciously, and that's how patterns are born. What we've done is we've begun to string coping mechanisms together. So maybe overworking to feel like you're good enough, or because that's how we feel worthy, or maybe it's constantly seeking validation. And so then it becomes not trusting yourself and being indecisive and taking forever to make a decision. And then you have to ask the people or you have to run it by your mentor. These are all the things that get up in our way. And it shows up in business just like it does in our personal lives. Because our business is a reflection of us. Our business is a reflection of how we're doing and of who we are. And it's a manifestation of what's happening inside of us. And we accidentally self-sabotage our success. Maybe it's like fear of failure and fear of going all in and fear of finding out that when you go all in, you're actually not good enough and you inevitably fail anyways. And so we self-sabotage in advance of that because our brain has already played it out. And we don't do the things that need to get done. And over time, oh, look, you're a failure. because all of that happened, but I manipulated it that way, but I tried. But you didn't really try. You self-sabotaged your way into failure. What would happen if you didn't? What would happen if you took all the BS away and actually gave it your best shot? If you took away the disempowering beliefs and the negative voice in your head and you just did what you said that you were going to do, even when it got hard, even when the self-doubt crept in, even when other things or people came up that made you doubt yourself, that made you second guess your strategy because everybody else is doing something different, we make emotional decisions, and that leaves us jumping from thing to thing instead of ever seeing one thing through thoroughly with the parameters that we set to test it. I see that all the time. And so then we're trying multiple things at once because everything is on fire and we have this lack of singular focus. And so because we're not focused on one thing and we're doing multiple things at once, how do you think we execute those strategies? We do it pretty poorly. And then everything fails and then we spin out and we're frantic because, oh no, none of that worked. And so the key to overcoming that is, one, to become emotionally regulated, to work through the lopsided perceptions and be able to balance those. It's the perception about what's happening, the response that we have to what's happening, the panic that comes up when literally nothing has changed, but we have a perception of it when we get emotional. It's balancing our lopsided perceptions when they come up. In panic, like, what are we so afraid of? And it's about balancing ourselves. Why do we think so low of ourselves? Why do we have so much self-doubt and pit ourselves? And then we look up to other people and envy their success and think that that person is better and think that they have it all figured out. Why do we doubt ourselves? It's the things that we haven't addressed within us. It's your internal operating system. It's all the bullshit that you bring with you into your business because your business is a manifestation of you. How you are doing is how your business is doing. We get in our own way. We subconsciously half-ass effort because the deep fear is that you're not good enough anyways. And then that frustration bleeds into our relationships and it starts affecting everything else in our life. And that's where maybe you're resentful or you're thinking about burning it all down and you don't know which way to go, and sometimes things work and sometimes things don't. And then you go back to the thing that you know works, but it's not ideal. And the answer is to do an operator reset and start working on you. Because business is a game of personal development. And so what kind of a person do you have to be at the next level? You have to be the next version of yourself. And if you're not there yet, and if you're struggling at this level, you're not going to be given more until you can overcome and become the version of yourself that can actually operate at your current level. And then you can go up. It doesn't work the other way around. You don't just keep getting. We have to earn our way there and work through all of our things. And typically, you can also find patterns in your business if you see what you're doing in your relationships, whether you have a significant other, whether you don't. We see our patterns in relationships the fastest because that's where we get the most triggered. So if there's something that continuously pops up in your relationships, get to the root of that. Try to understand it. How does this also show up in my business? If I have a fear of not being good enough, if I have a fear of being left, if I have a scarcity mindset, if I feel like I have to earn my worth, how does that show up in your business? How does that show up on your sales calls? How does that show up in team meetings or when you're correcting a team member or giving them positive feedback or assessing their performance? How does it show up when you take a risk? Because inherently in business, it is a game of risk. And the more risk that you take, the more upside there is. But you also have to be able to get through the discomfort of moving through risk, getting uncomfortable, and doing the thing in a calculated way with your strategy to get to the other side. But nothing is ever known. Nothing is ever guaranteed. You just do. And that's where resilience comes into play and self-trust. But if you have a self-worth issue and you're questioning yourself and you're making emotional decisions, how is that trust going for you? So it's a quick video, but I think that that was the most important thing that I could share with you today, because I think that's what business comes down to. And I think that that's what business success comes down to, because our success is reliant on who we are and how we are. Because what we are capable of is completely dependent on how we are operating. I'll see you next time.